We are talking about the parenting breakdance. Now, we have done a few episodes in the past on confidence and building confidence in kids. And there are a lot of tricks to that depending on what we're talking about. If we're talking about helping them avoid quitting in sports, then we're talking about being supportive and encouraging. If we're talking about just building their confidence in general, then we need to talk about allowing them to learn how to set boundaries and things along those lines. But I got faced with an interesting question the other day about kids and confidence that has not been brought up on our show before, I don't think. And that question was, what if you are trying to help teach your kid a skill, a physical or mental skill? You're trying to help them teach that, but every time you try to give them guidance or something, they kind of shut down on you and fall apart because they're not able to get it in the first few tries. That is what we are going to be discussing, and that's why this episode is called the Parenting Breakdance, because there are a few things you have to remember if you're trying to teach a skill of some kind to your kid. Now, I think for the most part, we're going to use the example that was given to us, which is basically like teaching a young kid to throw or to play catch or things along those lines. And I think that's the example we're going to stick on. So, I don't know. Do you have anything to add at this point?
Not at this point.
All right, so just want to give her a chance to say something since she's on here with you. Jump in. Okay, all right. So when it comes to trying to teach your kids a physical skill or something like that, and you find they give up a little too easy, or every time you give them advice, they're like, hey, I'm done with this activity. I want to go do something else. There's a few things we have to keep in mind, right? Especially when it comes to free time, kids want to feel good about what they are doing, right? So if you break off more than they can chew right off the bat, and you start to give them advice, they're gonna feel like they're not doing as well, and they're gonna feel like you're having to work to help them get it, and they want you to have fun, and they want to have fun. So in the end, they're gonna shut down on you in that case, right? So the first thing I bring up is start them as early as possible, especially when it comes to physical skills. Hey, what's up, Lucky? Thanks for joining us. So if you're a parent and you have this trouble with your kid, start them as early as possible for one, before they hit that point where they're worried about whether they mess up or do correctly or otherwise. Because, kids up to a certain age, 4, 5, 6 years old, they don't really care. So they're easier to be taught physical skills at that time. Now, whether that's the case or you're talking about a kid a little bit older than that, I think the next thing you need to look at is making sure that you start with it as easy as possible. And that's where the title of this Teammate Talks podcast comes in, right? The Parenting Breakdance. So when you're trying to teach your kid a skill, you first need to break it down as simple as possible. So let's take that example we were given about playing catch or throwing. So for example, if you're playing catch, that involves both catching and throwing, and it starts with a certain degree of difficulty that expects a child to have a certain amount of coordination
that they probably don't have,
and a certain amount of ability that they may not have yet. Now, if they're 8 or 9 and they don't have that skill, you may feel like they're developmentally behind, but that's not really the case. Every kid develops differently, and they develop these skills at different ranges and different ages, right? So you got to start them as easy as possible. So using that concept of throwing and catching, why not, before you put the baseball gloves on or go outside and start throwing a ball around that they're a little afraid of, why not start by breaking down with just throwing, right? Why not get a trash can, set it a few feet away, get a bunch of scrap paper and old mail, and have fun just crumpling it up and trying to throw it in the trash can, something like that, right? That way they're working on the throwing without the catching. And then at that point, instead of telling them what to do, and this is something we work on a lot in our 4 to 6 year old programs and our 7 to 8 year old programs, instead of telling them what to do, simply show them, let them try, and then encourage them when they get something right. So you might notice if you watch our 4 to 6 year olds or our 7 and 8 year olds, we don't give a lot of verbal correction. Instead, what we do is we go, oh, I'd really like to see you do it like this, and we show them, right? Because kids at that age, you start talking at them, and it's going to go in one ear out the other. They're going to feel like they're getting lectured. They're going to feel like they're getting in trouble. And so at that age, it's better to just show by example. So you can sit there with them, throwing bits of paper at a trash can, and then the better they get at it, you start moving that trash can farther and farther away. So maybe you start with it 2 feet away where they can almost just reach out and put it in the trash can. And then you make it farther and farther away with time, and they build that skill at throwing, right? So that's one way of breaking down a skill into something smaller.
And something else,
there's a kid just went running through the front window.
It was our child.
It was our child. Oh, it's like the Flash.
One thing you also need to understand, that it's hard for us as adults trying to teach a child something, is that a lot of times, even if it's not a serious level, there's an auditory processing delay.
Yes.
They don't have the vocabulary and experience we have, and so when we
or maybe they have the vocabulary, but it takes them longer to process the word.
Yeah, and so sometimes we try to explain things in a way that makes absolutely no sense to them, and they deer in the headlights.
And they will, and in that case, they will shut down and want to quit what they're doing so that they can take a few minutes to try to process whatever it is you just said to them.
Or they just won't want to do it because they pause, and so we get frustrated because they're not doing what we told them to do.
Yeah, and then so the second it's not a game to them, they're out. They're not going to want to keep playing. They're not going to want to keep trying, right? So we mentioned throwing. Maybe you could do that. Or another way that you could teach a kid to throw in a really fun way is to get you some type of like dodgeball, rubber dodgeball. You can use a basketball, but some younger kids might be afraid of it. And just lay down on the floor or on the bed, shoulder to shoulder, and take turns tossing the ball up and then letting it fall into the other person's hands so they're catching it, and make a bit of a game out of it, right? So now they get to practice certain types of throwing. Now that's not overhand throwing, that's more of like passing a basketball throwing, but it'll get them used to the concept of an object flying at them and their ability to catch it. So that for that game, we're focused on the catch and not the throw, right? So that allows them to set that kind of thing up. You could also expand on that, right? So the better they start to pick up the challenges, the more challenging aspects you can give them. So the next level to me would be to get a large bouncy ball, like the great big ones, right? Give your kid a large bouncy ball and throw them how they can bounce it against the floor to make it hit the wall, and it'll kind of fly up in the air slowly back towards them so they can practice bouncing it off the floor, then the wall, and then catching it. Now, when they get good at that, you can make it way harder by bouncing it off the wall first, so it hits the wall, the floor, and then catching it. That makes it move way faster. And these are all things that help build hand-eye coordination, the ability to catch, and yes, the ability to throw. So, like I said, start them as early as possible in these physical skills. Then make sure that if they struggle with it, that you break down the skills into the smaller, easier pieces of the skill, right? So if we have a kid in here struggling to throw a front kick, we're going to encourage them to keep throwing a front kick and things like that. But instead of focusing on the chamber and the rechamber and the balance and all that, we might just focus on putting something in front of them and telling them to push it with their foot, right? And in doing so, and putting their foot on it and pushing that object with it and having a little fun with it, turning it into a game, they're going to start to feel like they're doing better, and they're naturally going to build the technique they need for that front kick, right? The lift, the push, the bring it back in, and things like that. So again, breaking it down, make it as easy as possible. Second, rule number 2, and this one's even more important, right? Make sure the game you're playing, there's not winning and losing, but there are fun motivators, right? Include fun motivators. One of the ones I teach my instructors to use when they're first learning to teach, because it's one of the easiest ones to do, is tell them that you'll do a push-up every time they do it right. Tell them that you'll do a sit-up for them every time they do it right, but that there's no penalty for them if they do it wrong. See, if I tell my son, hey, every time I toss this and you catch it, I'll do a push-up for you, he's going to be motivated to do it. And every time I have to do a push-up because he did the right thing, he's going to laugh and giggle and feel better about it, and he's going to try way harder to catch it, right? But if I make a rule that if he misses it, he has to do a push-up, well, now it's no longer fun because it begins to get frustrating when they start messing up. So have no consequences for mistakes, but do have some sort of little reward for when they accomplish exactly what you're trying to do. And in my opinion, that's step 2 for building confidence in teaching kids a physical skill. And this is something that we do all the time.
Yeah.
A little louder.
A lot of kids have a super hard time with feeling like they are awful because they made a mistake.
Yeah.
You have to remember too that while you're in this step 2 process of motivating them, that you remind them that actions don't dictate them as human beings. It's not that they are a bad person or they are a failure or they are a mistake. It happened, and those things happen while they're learning,
right?
And that's okay.
Which goes back to encouragement. When you encourage a kid, encourage them for something specific, or don't encourage them for something specific they did. Instead, encourage them for the effort that they put into it or the effort that it took to work on it, and then they will keep working on it and they will slowly get better, right? And that's kind of an important part of breaking things down. I kind of forgot the other thing I was going to say about that while you were talking, but that's okay. So any of you guys out there, parents in particular, watching this live broadcast, make sure, if you're watching it later, make sure you leave some comments on your thoughts on this kind of thing. But like I say, if you want to see other videos on building a kid's confidence through sports, or building a kid's confidence through using power phrases or encouragement phrases and stuff like that, we have some other episodes on that. This one is purely about building a kid's confidence when it comes to a physical skill, right? But if you start making it a consequence when they do something wrong, the thing is you're always like, parents tell kids what they're doing wrong all the time. It's kind of part of guiding them, right? And kids understand this too. But when it comes to playtime, unstructured playtime, when it comes to fun time, they want to enjoy that time with you without doing anything that they feel like they're getting gotten onto for. So the second you're having playtime and they start feeling like you're lecturing them or like they're doing something wrong in your eyes, they're going to want to stop, because that playtime for them is their chance to spend time with you doing something where there's not that parent-kid dynamic, doing something where they're less afraid of doing something wrong by you or getting in trouble by you, right? And there needs to be those two different sets of time. So kids can have that time where, you're the parent and they know that you're going to get onto them and guide them and do things like that. But they also need time with you where they can feel like they can mess up and be silly without being gotten onto for it. So the second they start to feel like they're gotten onto or lectured for making a mistake in the game you're playing, they're not going to want to play that game anymore. So that's really important.
Realize too that as a parent, our job isn't just to make sure they know what right from wrong is.
Or how to throw or how to catch or...
Yeah, and this plays into what you were saying.
Well, here's the thing we have to understand. Right and wrong are based on perspective, right? And other people's perspective is going to be different than my perspective. So other people's perspectives for them, my perspectives for me. So the only way that we can really look at that, good and bad, wrong or right, is through our own lens of experience. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off for that, but I wanted to add that little caveat in there.
So this is in relation to the playtime. Like if we want them to learn a skill, make sure that's incorporated into playtime and where, but that's also a time you can help them learn social setting,
social
etiquette,
dynamic,
social
and boundary setting.
Yeah, and so that's
which is going to be our next topic here, actually.
Well, it's a good
good segue.
So make sure you're not correcting or overcorrecting, but teaching them how to understand people's body language, their tone of voice, and setting those boundaries. It is so, so important. And when you set those boundaries, it's actually easier to help them learn without them feeling like you are teaching them.
Right, and that's another thing that creates a difficult balance in parenting that I want to get to, and that is building a kid's confidence to be able to set boundaries for themselves. Because a lot of parents out there, I'm not placing blame on anybody, and I'm sorry if you feel called out by this, but a lot of parents out there are still parenting the do what I said, or do it because I said so type of parenting. The problem with that is it takes away autonomy, and it does not give your child the feeling that they're allowed to set boundaries for themselves or the autonomy to set boundaries for themselves. Hey, Vintage Typer, good to see you. Hey, Robert, thanks for saying hi. I appreciate y'all out there in YouTube land.
And we do that to our kids, and we say, well, because I told you so. Do that because I told you so. This is what you need to do.
Right, and then if they do try to set a boundary, that's what we always do to them. They'll try to set a boundary, and then we'll say, but I'm the parent, you're the kid, you're going to do what I told you to do. Now, sometimes that's important. Sometimes there are times for that, right? And this is actually going to kind of segue into next week's discussion. Next week's discussion is going to be about the why factor. The why factor, the why is the most important question to answer and ask, in my opinion. You should always know your why. And if you are getting onto your kid or getting them to do a certain thing or trying to establish a certain thing you want them to do, instead of saying because I said so, tell them why it's important the thing gets done, why it's important that they help out with it. And don't be afraid to give some gritty details about that, right? Well, I don't want to take out the trash, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're going to do it because I said so. Instead of that being like, well, someone needs to do it, because if you don't, there's going to be all these nasty roaches and ants everywhere in the house. And man, I've got all this other stuff I got to do. I really need the help. If that gets left, it's going to get really nasty in here. And so I really need you to do me a favor and get that taken care of. And they might be grudging about it at the beginning, but the earlier you start that with kids, like I started it with ours when he started talking, like 3 years old, right? And it was relatively easy for him to just kind of, he'd hear the explanation and then be like, oh yeah, I don't want a bunch of roaches in the house, so I'm going to take the trash out, right? So explaining why is important, but you also have to leave a little bit of space for kids to learn to set age-appropriate boundaries with you. What do I mean by age-appropriate boundaries? Well, I mean, obviously as the parent, you're guiding them, you're helping them, you're keeping them safe, so you need them to listen to you relatively well to a certain degree. But they're going to be far more willing to listen to you if they feel like you're willing to listen to them. So for example, if they're playing with something, a toy or something, and you come in and start playing with them because you want to have a good time with them, and you touch a certain toy of theirs and they say, no, that's my toy, allow them that boundary. That's an age-appropriate boundary for a 3 or 4-year-old, as long as they're not hitting or slapping. And even if they are, you can do that. Hey, it's okay to not want me to play with that toy, but tell me not to play with that toy. No slapping or hitting. We use our words, not our fists, right? Or words, not our hands, right? Things like that. There's a lot of different tricks you can use for that kind of thing. But my point is if you want your kids to feel able to set boundaries with their peers so they don't fall to peer pressure, if you want them to feel able to set boundaries in ways that will keep them out of trouble as a teenager, then you have to start allowing them to set age-appropriate boundaries when they're young.
And when you're trying to teach them a physical skill, like pulling it back to the catching scenario, I am with our son and I'm trying to teach him how to catch, and he's getting frustrated, even if it's playful, but he gets frustrated and he says, I can't do it. Well, this is a time for me to help him learn that saying I can't isn't good. Well,
or you say no.
In a nice way.
You say no, not right now. You haven't been able to pull it off, but the more you keep trying, you will. Yes. Right? But like I said, the important part of that is make it fun. Use a fun motivator. Hey, every time you catch this ball, I'll do a push-up for you. Hey, if you make 10 catches in this game of catch, we'll go get a popsicle or ice cream or a snow cone. Some little thing like that really helps. And let me hold that thought for a second. So vintage typer, yeah, that's actually something we run into a lot with parents in our studio, is a lot of parents do that. They're stuck in that do as I say thing, but they don't explain or guide their kids as to why that thing is important. So it's like, some parents want their kids to view them solely as the authority, right? And it kind of goes back to respect. So you have some people that use the term respect to mean treat me like a human being. You have other people that use the term respect to mean treat me like an authority. And then you have other people, and to me it's the parents that do the because I said so type of thing. You have other people who will tell you, treat me with respect. And what they mean by that is, treat me like I'm an authority. When in all reality, they say, treat me with respect and I'll treat you with respect. And what they really mean is, you treat me like an authority in order for me to treat you like a human being. And that is wrong on so many levels, right? Wrong on so many levels. Yeah, no, so I wanted to answer Vince's type, but there, go ahead.
But why it's important to let them say, I can't, or I'm struggling, is because they need to be able to verbalize those things. And they need to feel comfortable expressing themselves to you. So them saying that to you is you being their safe space. If you immediately yell at them or get onto them and be like, I didn't raise no kid to say can't, or whatever, you're going to keep doing it anyway. Well, that's going to slowly drive a rift between you and your kids that builds to resentment, and the reason that they start hiding more things from, all teens hide things from their parents, but the reason they start hiding more things from you. Matter of fact, I've taken all this to heart since I started teaching kids, got really invested in behavioral psychology, influence, and things like that. And I'll say this, my kid hit his teen years recently, and to be honest, there are times that I'm like, you are too open with me. Like, can't you keep that one to yourself, dude? And at the same time, as a parent, I'm like, no, I want him to come talk to me about things he finds important, so I'm gonna deal with it, right? And I'm gonna do that. But at the same time, if you treat a kid like that, they're gonna feel more open coming to you when they really need the help down the road. And you may have times as a teenager, you're just like, when they're teens, that you're just like, wow, you could have kept that to yourself. I didn't need to know that. But it shows that they feel comfortable talking to you about that. And if they feel comfortable talking to you about that, they're going to feel more comfortable talking to you about relationship problems, about peer pressure, about drinking, about parties, about drugs. They're going to feel a lot more comfortable talking to you about the things they face, because they're going to feel like they're not facing judgment from you. So when my son brings up something, teenage related, having to do with alcohol, drugs, or otherwise, I don't
judge him for it. I purposefully don't judge him for it. Fact is, he brought up the concept to me. And so that's my chance to kind of guide him and be like, oh yeah, man, you want to avoid that kind of stuff because I fell down that road and this is what happened to me and here's why. Always explain your why. Here's why and all that. But if he doesn't feel safe enough to bring up, hey, a friend of mine said that he does this drug and I don't know what to think about it. Well, instead of telling him, well, don't see that friend anymore, I'm going to tell him, oh, that's sad that person fell into addiction like that. You know, you don't want to follow him down that road. And then I can give him guidance like an old wise man giving guidance to a young father. And that's how I treat giving guidance to my kid, like an old wise man giving guidance to a young, inexperienced adult, even if he's only 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever, right?
Yeah. So, just kind of recap, because I feel like we've come away and come back a few times.
Well, because I did want to talk about setting boundaries with confidence. If you want your kids to be confident setting boundaries, you have to let them practice with you. But like I said, an age-appropriate one for a little kid might be, I don't want you to play with my toy, right? You get up to the 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and you might, like, dads in video games. This might not relate to a lot of y'all, but dads that play video games and dads that play video games with their kids. There's a little bit of trash talking gets involved, right? It's and the older they get, the more that trash talking gets there. But when your kid hits the ages of 7, 8, 9, 10, they're going to become a little bit more verbally sensitive to the things you say. They may be able to handle the stuff other kids say, but when it comes from you, someone they care about, at first they can't handle it very well. And so they might set a boundary of, hey, Dad, please don't talk to me like that when we play games. Please don't mouth me like that when we're playing. And then if I say, okay, I'm going to respect your boundary, just understand that not everybody's going to respect boundaries like that, but I'm going to respect it. It allows them to feel more confident in setting that boundary in the first place.
Which makes anything else that you need to teach them, whether it's a physical, emotional, or social skill, so much easier because you have left that door open and that communication is now two-way instead of just you.
And they feel confident saying no. And they feel confident saying no. You need your kids to feel confident saying no, which means you have to let them practice on you when safety is not on the line, right? When something important is not on the line, you have to allow them to say no sometimes. Hey, 12-year-old kid, go to the movies to see this with us. And then they're like, well, I don't really want to see that movie. No, I'd really rather not go. Well, just respect that. No, it's fine. It's just a movie. Nobody cares, right? Things like that allow them to feel more confident in setting boundaries with their friends and their peers in later life. And especially in social media, like this kind of stuff really matters. My YouTube is chock full. Like I got a lot of kids that follow, and I love all my fans, y'all, young ones, old ones, otherwise. But I got a lot of kids that follow, and it's crazy how jealous they get of a channel that starts to do well when their personal channel isn't doing well. And so they think somehow that by being rude and mean on somebody else's channel that they're somehow going to hurt that channel and somehow that's going to make them famous. In all reality, the only thing that's actually going to help them there is if they learn to take that energy they use in being negative to the people who are winning and put that energy into figuring out how to win, they would do a heck of a lot better, right? But jealousy is a real issue, and kids under the age of like 16, I did even venture to 18, maybe even 20, really struggle with the concept of jealousy. Even if logically they know it makes no sense, or logically they know it's a dumb thing to be jealous about, or that being jealous about it or spending energy on it is only going to hurt their cause, they still, kids at that age, your brain don't fully develop till you're like 24. So your brains don't, it's difficult for them to deal with the jealousy and the things like that, and I get that. But I think it would be better if parents were better at raising confident kids. Then I think we would see a lot less of that crap on YouTube and online, and some of the comments I get are crazy. And I mean, one of them got so bad yesterday, and I just, some kid was mouthing, and I mouthed back a little bit just for fun. And man, kid, I don't know about kid, may have been an adult, took it to heart and like really jumped on it and was all kinds of super upset. I'm like, man, you don't get to go trash talk somebody and then not expect them to trash talk you back. In the end, I did them a favor by hiding their comments publicly, because I'm like, your mama's going to see that one of these days, kind of way you're talking to people online, right? But the way we do that is we make sure that we raise our kids to be more confident. Now, this is one way. We talked about confidence and skills, but let's recap some of our old episodes on this, right? Another way to build confidence is to be careful the way that we praise things that they do. For example, instead of praising the thing that they do, praise the effort, praise the amount of time that they put into it, that kind of thing. Because now if they do get A on their math test and you say, that's awesome that you got an A on that test, I appreciate that you worked really hard for that test or whatever, what are they going to feel when they get a C on their next test? They're going to feel like they let you down, right? But instead, if they get an A on the test and you say, hey, that means you put in a lot of effort, and I'm really proud of the effort you put in, regardless of the grades you get. I saw you working hard, and that's the important part, regardless of what the grade is, because that grade ain't going to matter when you're 28 or 30, right? And that way, if they do bad on the next test, they're going to remember, but they had the same amount of effort in, they're going to remember you praise the effort, not the grade, right? So that's another thing that builds confidence. Second one, and this is one I've talked about probably the most on my live videos, relates to sports and activities. Let the coaches coach, dadgummit. Parents aren't supposed to coach. Even if you're good at something, right? I've done several of these kind of videos on this before. Even if you're good at what it is that your kid did, maybe you played it in college, maybe you were a pro athlete playing whatever sport your kid is playing. Well, your kid's not a pro. Your kid's not playing in college. They're a kid playing on a kid's team, and they have a coach already that's giving them a hard time and trying to help them build skills, but giving them a hard time on what they need to work on, or trying to give motivating speeches about things they need to improve on. If then they get out of that speech and they're processing what coach said, and then you're driving home with them and you start giving them the same crap coach just gave them, they're going to start feeling like they stink. They're going to start feeling like they're not any good at the activity, and they're going to want to quit. This is the number one factor that drives kids to quit, and the number one factor that drives kids' self-esteem and confidence into the ground. If you are the parent, you are the supporter. Let the coaches coach. Now, if you do want to help your kid coach, sorry, I have to cover this one more time. If you do want to help your kid coach, or coach your kid because you were a collegiate level player or something like that, just don't do it without their permission. So what I mean by that is, ask them. Be like, hey, you played a good game today. I'm sorry your team lost, but you put good effort out there. That was a really good job. Hey, I used to play this sport in college, and I noticed I can teach you a skill that might help you in your next game. Would you like me to teach you that when we get home? And if they say no, respect it. If they say yes, then you can guide them through it using the same things we said at the beginning of this video. Rewatch the video, break it down as easy as possible, use fun games, use fun motivators. Then you can do that to help them build that skill. But if they feel like they're struggling at the game, they've lost their last 5 games, practices aren't going so well, then they get in the car and you're yelling at them for the mistakes that they make, they are going to quit. If they don't quit physically, they're going to quit mentally, and they are not going to improve or get better at that sport.
And the thing is, 98% of the time, your kid does not want you to be their coach.
No, they want you to be their support.
3-year-old, our son, looked at me straight in the eyes one day. Of course, this is 10 years ago now. And he goes, "You're not my teacher." And I went, "Fine, go find your dad."
Yeah.
And I have not coached him or trained him a day since, because that's not what he needs from me. He straight up told me, that is not what I need from you.
Well,
and that was fine. So I took a support role, and I'm like, hey, do you want some advice? Or he comes to me with a specific question, I don't give him any advice at all.
Well, and I do coach and train him, I do give him advice.
And that's where he wants that from you, though. He doesn't want that from you.
Then that's fair. I do coach and train him. I do give him advice. I just make sure he's ready for it, right? Yeah. So I don't just jump in and give unsolicited advice. I'll say, hey, man, I saw you working on that. I think I see something that might help you. Do you want to know what it is? Well, yeah. All right. Well, you're not throwing your arms right to generate spin in that flip or whatever. Because he's into flipping, parkour tricks and all that. And I do. And then, like, I can always tell when he wants advice from me now as a teen, because there's a certain tone he'll take when he's describing something that happened or something somebody said, and he'll kind of leave it off like a question. And I know he's fishing for guidance or advice, and so I'll give it. And sometimes he gets to the point where he doesn't need or want guidance or advice, but he still fishes for it from me just because he likes to see me squirm uncomfortably while I'm trying to answer it, right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure he just baits me into those now. Probably. But yeah, so it's different between me and him, and I don't really coach him. I do coach him, I do train him, but only when the time is appropriate, and typically when he asks for it. If he starts to say, hey, I want to take your class this week, all right, then I'm going to coach you in the class, right? Yeah. Hey, I feel like I messed up leading the 7 to 8 year old Tigers program. Okay, well, here is something you can use that would have caused that or prevented that problem in the first place.
But you know what's always been interesting to me, if he was in a class that I was leading, he wouldn't listen to me. But if he was in a class you were leading, even at younger ages, he would listen to you.
Sometimes.
For the most part.
He does more now than he used to.
And then when he stopped doing that, we had Mr. Mueller teach him.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was a complete opposite with us when it came to academic stuff. Academic stuff, he leans a lot more heavily into me than he does you.
The only time he comes to me for academic stuff is if he needs me to break down something mathematical or scientific into easy to understand terms, because that's something I was always really good at.
Yeah.
Is explaining math better than a textbook does and explaining science better than a textbook does in very layman's terms, very simplest, bottom of the barrel terms. So he'll come to me with that kind of stuff quite a bit. But yeah, no, and like I said, I've coached and trained him for a long time, but I have a rule about it, right? If I'm coaching, training him on something, he's asked me to help him. Mostly, I don't so much train him as train with him and then give him advice as I'm training with him. And I think that's kind of the difference, you know, because I'm doing it with while he's doing it. And then I allow him to give me advice because he has surpassed me in trick kicking years ago. So I allow him to give me advice on other things I'm working at. So he feels like it's an exchange of information rather than me, a coach, talking down to him. But one of my big rules there is if you want advice or coaching from me, and then you start to get frustrated or argue with me about the advice I'm giving you, it's time to stop our training session. It's time to stop our coaching session. We can either stop here and go home and play video games, or you can continue to train on your own for the next hour or whatever, and I'll go do my own thing, right? But that's my boundary. Yeah? If you're gonna want me to help train you and coach you, and then you're going to yell at me because you don't like what I said or because you're frustrated about it, then I'm not going to coach you for the next hour. Not forever, just for the next hour until you calm down. We can stop there. Maybe it's a good time to stop, right? Because if you're getting frustrated at what you're doing, you're just slowly getting worse at it. Anyway, we've covered all the little details off and on about building confidence. We started off talking about building confidence with skills. We talked about building confidence. We touched on the subjects of building confidence in other ways. Don't worry, we will do new podcast episodes that will be completely about those other ways of building confidence again. But tune in next week to Teammate Talks, and we're going to be talking about the why factor.
I love this.
We're either going to be talking about that or we're going to be talking about patience. I'm not sure, because I have one about perspective and patience I want to do as well, but I might put that off an extra week because I feel like the why factor is a far more important topic. And of course, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I talked about the why factor in regards to patience this last week with classes.
They kind of go together.
Because, I mean, it is. You have to be patient with people. You have to be accepting that they're going to have questions and they need answers. And
kids are far more willing to follow rules and directions if they know why those rules and directions exist. If they have real world, age appropriate examples as to why that's the rule or why that exists, they're far more likely to make the right choice. I did a podcast talking about a study done in the 60s, one in the 80s, and one in the 90s that proved that children will make better decisions for themselves if they understand why the decision is better, right? But they have to understand why first. And that's why I feel like the why factor is so important. But so many parents run away from those questions because, those are the hard ones to answer. So I get it. It's hard to answer why. But if you can, then kids are going to be far more willing to listen to your rules.
And they'll critical think better.
And they'll learn to critically think. So then they'll learn to look at a future thing and say, hey, I used to have to follow this rule at home because of this safety issue. And now I'm looking forward at this thing I'm doing now. And I see a safety issue. So maybe I should institute a rule regarding this, right? And yeah, it creates forward thinking, critical thinking individuals. And if you don't know your why, someone else does. Right? So no, I'm serious. If you don't know your why behind doing something, someone else knows exactly why you're doing it. Because there are people out there and tens of billions of dollars a year that go, and I did a podcast on this a few weeks ago about online safety, influence, and psychology, right? There's all this money every year going to understand human behavior, understanding statistics, and understanding why people make decisions that they make, even if they themselves don't know why they make those decisions or take those actions. And then those people are using that against you through marketing, through online channels, through everything else. They're using that against you in order to have influence over you, right? So in one video a long time ago, my most viral clip I ever made said, if you let the words of other people control your mood, then everyone in the world can control your mood except for you. And I recently expanded on that to say that if you get your opinions from other people, as in you can't look at all sides of a subject before making your own opinion, before jumping to conclusions, before becoming biased, then you can't make your own decisions on your opinion. So if you're just taking other people's opinion, well, I believe this because everyone around me believes that, instead of I believe this for X, Y, Z, Y reasons. Again, always know your why, right? But you just say, well, your why is just because everyone around you believes it, so you're going to believe it too. Then that's not your opinion. Now think about this. Every action and decision you make in your life is typically going to be based on your opinion and your experience. So if you are not taking the time to develop your own opinion to base those decisions and actions on, then who is actually making those decisions and taking those actions? Who's actually in control of your decisions and actions? Is it you? Or is it the people whose opinions you've decided to buy into because it's easier than forming your own opinion, because it's easier than actually thinking critical about the subject? This is really important to me, which is why I tell my students, my martial arts students, my parkour students, question me all the time. Doubt everything that I teach you. Assume that everything I teach you is wrong, or maybe not good, or maybe there's a better way, and then keep trying it any way that you can. Because you're going to learn so much faster and so much better if you learn to find the answers for yourself than you are if you just let someone give you the answers over and over. So now beginners, we give them the answers because, well, they're learning techniques and stuff. When they get to my class, the intermediate, advanced, the black belts, etc., I'm not going to directly give you the answer at first. I'm going to give you 10 minutes of a drill designed to help you figure out a new way to use a technique that you've never thought of before, a new way to use a principle that you've never thought of before. And then if nobody figures it out in 5 or 10 minutes, then I'll stop the class and kind of berate them and be like, I can't believe no one realized that you can use this technique for getting up in order to get up from a guard too. Or that you can use this same single leg technique with your hands as you can with your legs. Or that you can use this same ankle sweep sideways instead of straight on. So I put together drills that allow them the opportunity to learn how to use techniques in new and interesting ways on my level 2 and 3 floor. And then if they really struggle to figure it out, I'll hint and question them until they find the answer. But that's because I'm trying to encourage critical thinking in my students. I'm trying to encourage my students to be critical of everything that I teach them so that they will test it out for themselves, so that they will learn for themselves what is going to work for them. Because I teach a lot of techniques. 80% of what I teach is stuff I have found very useful. The other 20% I about left out of the curriculum, but I only left in because other students that I had, such as her or my son or other people, found those useful even if I couldn't make them work. That just means I didn't train them well enough, and they did, right? And so there's always some stuff in a self-defense curriculum. Like all of our martial arts classes are not, it's not technical karate or TKD or Muay Thai or Judo or Jiu-Jitsu. It's a little bit of everything based in self-defense, right? So everything that we do is a traditional martial art, but it is all based in self-defense and pulls from various styles and things like that, because our entire curriculum wasn't just something handed down for generations. I trained in several of those handed down curriculums, and you know what I learned? They all have cons to them. They all have negatives to them, including Jiu-Jitsu, including Muay Thai. They all have downsides to them. And I wanted to set up a curriculum where every one of the techniques and principles were tried and tested over and over and over, not just by the instructors, but by the students who teach them, or students who learn them. And we have them try them and test them. And we have them question their efficacy, right? Because that way, it could just be that 80% of people do this technique just fine, but 20% can't make it work, and that's fine. If ever a technique or principle gets to the point where over 50% of our students can't make it work, then it drops from the curriculum. If something new comes in and we test it with 20 students and 17 of them love it and it works beautifully for them in the self-defense, then it gets added to their curriculum. Our entire curriculum is not static. We add to it and take away from it as things get tested. So everything about our curriculum is rotated through being tested by us and by our students with striking involved. So we test our jiu-jitsu skills with striking involved. We test our striking with takedowns and wrestling involved. We test everything with everything else involved, right? And it makes a far more well-rounded curriculum, and it makes our students, by the time they hit intermediate and advanced, way more confident in their ability to fight and defend themselves, because they've had to learn half through experience and half through technique work. Yeah. And then the thing is every guy, every dude, every 12-year-old boy thinks they can fight, especially if they just so happen to have cheap shotted somebody once or twice, so they think that means they can fight. Everybody feels that way until their first sparring night, right? Everybody thinks that until their first sparring night. But there is a big difference between sucker punching somebody and then coming in here and building hours and hours and hours and hours of experience against people that fight in completely different ways from each other, right? I really did get off topic with that one. So I'm going to stop there. Tune in next week where we talk about how why is so important. Remember, you can find our podcast, Teammate Talks, by searching hashtag Teammate Talks almost anywhere you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. You can check out our live videos or go to our playlist. You'll find one named Teammate Talks or Teammate Live Radio or something like that. It's an old name, and you'll find many of our old video episodes in there. Feel free to take a look at them. Leave me some comments. YouTube, I appreciate y'all keeping it positive today. Until we see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be, and be the best at being you. Oh, I can't click end. The cord's clicking it.